Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. Inflation. Just that word alone is enough to cause stress, and for retirees, it is one of the biggest financial unknowns. The 2025 EBRI Retirement Confidence Survey showed that inflation remains one of the top stressors for retirees, even though confidence did tick up slightly compared to last year. And Schroders U.S. Retirement Survey found that over 90% of retirees worry about inflation eroding their savings. And that makes sense because inflation is sneaky. It chips away at your purchasing power in ways you don't even notice until you look back in time. For example, if you retired in 1985 with the median family income at the time, about $23,000 a year or about $1,900 a month, fast forward to 2025, to have the same spending power, you'd need about $70,000 a year or just under $6,000 a month. That's why inflation is such a big concern. Not only are you often retiring into a situation where it feels like you're on a fixed income, but you then need your portfolio to last for 20, 30, or 40 years. And it has to sustain a lifestyle that is going to come with a more expensive price tag as time goes on, even if you're not inflating your lifestyle. So inflation, it is this silent force in the background, increasing the costs of homes and cars, groceries, utilities, activities, you name it. But how big of a concern is inflation really? Well, if you retire debt-free, it's much less threatening. For instance, if you own your home outright, you don't care what today's mortgage rates are, and you don't care that the average new home today is selling for over $400,000. That doesn't affect you. Of course, you still have utilities and property taxes, and those are meaningful, but it's a lot less pressure than if you're also carrying a mortgage. You have a lot more breathing room in your budget. Where inflation still stings is the day-to-day expenses, like groceries, travel, and especially healthcare. And healthcare inflation really is the outlier. JP Morgan's 2025 Guide to Retirement suggests that we should assume a 6% annual healthcare inflation. That is much higher than the General Consumer Price Index, or CPI. Fidelity estimates that a 65-year-old couple can expect to spend around $172,500 in lifetime healthcare costs. One of the best things you can do to prepare is have a dedicated healthcare bucket that is beyond and outside your regular portfolio. And this is in case you ever need something like long-term care or a nursing care down the road. And here's what that might look like. Say you want $200,000 available by the age of 70 for long-term care. If you're 60 today and can earn 6% on your investments, you would only need about $110,000 invested now. Or if you think you don't need that money until you're 80, at 60, you'd only need about $62,000 invested today. This kind of earmarked plan can really create peace of mind. But of course, that does mean you would need to be able to cover your day-to-day health expenses, premiums, copays, any out-of-pocket expenses from your regular portfolio. And what if you never end up using this healthcare bucket? Well, all the better. That means you lived a long and healthy life and you can just pass this money on to your heirs. Currently today, it's about 2% of seniors age 65 plus who are in assisted living, and about 4.5% who are in a nursing facility. We never know the things that might happen down the road, but it certainly doesn't hurt to plan in case this is part of your future or the future for a loved one. How retirees actually adjust to inflation. The truth is, retirees do adjust their spending based on the environment they're in. Recently, we all lived through a bout of high inflation. And unsurprisingly, retirees responded in real time. Boston College found that 39% of near retirees changed their savings behavior because of inflation, and 23% adjusted their withdrawals between 2021 and 2023. The Society of Actuaries has found that about 80% of retirees have historically adjusted their spending patterns during high inflationary periods. And in 2025, Nationwide reported that 52% had cut discretionary spending, while 31% even reduced essential spending to keep up with higher costs. Now, I think it's pretty normal to see that half of retirees are tightening their belt on discretionary spending when costs costs are high, but I think it's more concerning to see that about a third are reducing their spending on essentials. I hope you're never in the position where you have to reduce your spending on essentials like food or housing. I don't want those items to be on the chopping block for you. The bigger reminder here is that we do tend to adjust spending in response to circumstances. When prices rise, most of us naturally tighten our belt. When markets are strong and inflation is low, we feel like we have a bit more freedom to spend. This is also a reminder of why it's so important to save and have a bit of a cushion as you go into retirement when your income tends to be a little fixed, because while you do have influence on your spending, you don't want to be in a position where you're having to cut your essentials. It is a much better position to be adjusting your spending by choice rather than by necessity. What about real data on retirement spending? The good news is, in practice, most retirees spend far less than what most models suggest. Multiple studies show that inflation-adjusted spending typically declines by about 1% per year on average, and in some cases, by almost 2% per year. Another common model we see beyond the standard simple decline in spending is captured in the retirement spending smile. We have the go-go years in early retirement where spending is the highest. We have travel and hobbies and big lifestyle purchases. Then we transition to the slow-go years, mid-retirement. Spending declines as activity naturally slows, often by 1% per year in real terms. Then we have the no-go years, late retirement. Costs increase again, but largely due to healthcare or long-term care, not discretionary activities. If you assume a flat 3% inflationary adjustment every single year, you could very well be overestimating your spending needs. That can lead to oversaving prior to retirement or unnecessarily restricting yourself once you're in retirement. Flexible spending strategies, on the other hand, often provide more security over the long haul for a portfolio, and they often reflect how retirees truly live and spend. But the most popular retirement models assume constant spending, rising with inflation. And yes, inflation will make things more expensive over the years. But in reality, travel and clothing, entertainment, and most discretionary categories shrink with age, enough to offset rising healthcare costs for the vast majority of retirees. The net effect is an overall decline in spending, and that reduces pressure on your portfolio over time. And importantly, this is by choice. Quite simply, someone who's in their 80s or 90s has less desire for expensive travel or to pursue expensive hobbies compared to someone who's in their 50s or 60s. Desires change over time, and so too does spending. To put this in perspective, let's say you enter retirement with a $40,000 annual budget. Most retirement models assume that spending grows with inflation every year, usually around 3% or so. Under that model, your $40,000 would need to grow to nearly $97,000 a year after 30 years just to keep up. But actual retiree data tells a different story, because spending tends to decline by about 1% a year in real terms. That same $40,000 would look more like $72,000 after 30 years. That's a massive difference. The traditional spending model says that you may need nearly a six-figure income in 30 years' time simply to maintain your lifestyle. But when we look at data from real retirees, it suggests that we need far less. Remember that if you assume flat inflation adjustments over time, you risk oversaving and unnecessarily restricting your spending in retirement. If you have a plan that's more flexible, it's more realistic of what we tend to see in retirement. And then there's Social Security, which functions as your built-in inflation-adjusted income floor. Now, there is often a big debate as to whether the cost of living adjustments applied to Social Security really keep pace with the inflation that retirees experience, especially considering that inflation for healthcare expenses runs so much hotter than traditional inflation. But history does show us that it goes a long way towards preserving purchasing power. For perspective, the average benefit in 1985 was about $440 a month. With every cost of living adjustment applied through 2024, that benefit would be about $1,343 a month today in 2025, almost exactly aligned with overall inflation. It's also worth taking a moment to consider the impact of when you claim. Currently, if you were to retire at full retirement age, in this situation we'll assume age 67, the average monthly benefit is $2,000 a month. If you were to claim early at age 62, the benefit would then be about $1,400 a month, and if you waited all the way until the age of 70, that benefit would increase to $2,480 a month. And this is where the power of cost of living adjustments can show up over time. Now, each benefit would get the same percentage increase over time, but if you're starting from a higher base, you're going to get a higher dollar amount increase. Assuming a steady 2% cost of living adjustment each year, here's what those benefits would look like down the road. Claiming at age 62, starting with a $1,400 a month benefit, it would grow to about $2,500 a month after 30 years. Instead, if you waited to claim at the age of 70, with that $2,480 benefit, it would grow to about $4,500 a month after 30 years. That's the added bonus of delaying when you claim. Not only do you start from a higher number, but every cost of living adjustment compounds from a higher number, and this can give you greater longevity protection because the inflation adjustments are more impactful. And this is just yet another decision of why it's so important to carefully consider when you claim Social Security, because not only is this a decision that will impact you today, it is a decision that will impact you 10, 20, or 30 years down the road. So what does all this mean? Inflation will likely be a top of mind concern for retirees, but the good news is that we tend to see a real decline in spending over the long haul of a retirement. And that means that we have less pressure on a portfolio. That softens the blow of inflation over the long haul. The real outlier is healthcare. Planning for medical inflation of 5 or 6%, well above the broader CPI, is smart. Having a dedicated healthcare bucket or simply building that assumption into your plan goes a long way towards giving you peace of mind in retirement. Social Security is another key protection. Cost of living adjustments aren't perfect, especially since certain categories for retirees tend to run hotter than traditional CPI or traditional inflation, like healthcare. However, historically, these cost of living adjustments have done their job and help to preserve purchasing power over time. And it's nice that we have this security feature built into the system. Beyond that, your portfolio is your defense line. Equities, TIPS, Treasury inflation protected securities, and other growth assets are what keep your money working for you. Yes, it's important to have money to spend today, but it's also important that you stay invested and you keep your money growing so that it keeps pace, or more importantly, outpaces inflation. That way you'll still have money to spend 10, 20, or 30 years down the road. And then there's the safe withdrawal rate. The entire point of using a safe withdrawal framework is that it bakes inflation adjustments right in. It's been tested across every rolling 30-year period in U.S. history, including the double-digit inflation of the 1970s and early 1980s, even when inflation hit 8, 9, 10, 11% or more, retirees following a 4% withdrawal rate were still able to make their inflation-adjusted withdrawals each year and have their portfolio last for 3 decades. That's the strength of the strategy. In even the most hostile inflation environments, it still worked. The bottom line, inflation isn't a force you can ignore, but it's also not a reason to panic. With realistic spending assumptions, healthcare planning, smart Social Security decisions, and a disciplined investment and withdrawal strategy, you can build a retirement plan that preserves your lifestyle not just today, but for decades to come. Inflation may feel like that silent force that has the power to shrink your retirement, but it doesn't have to. With a flexible strategy and a solid strategy, you can maintain your lifestyle for 10, 20, or 30 years. The key is to have the flexibility to make adjustments when you choose to, rather than being forced to. So what are your thoughts on inflation? Leave them in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. Fixed income, but did you oops, sorry, didn't mean to hit the microphone. Where inflation still stings, The truth is, retirees adjust. The truth is, than most models would suggest. Ooh, I heard it. Beyond. Sorry. Someone was telling me I just popped up on NBC's feed today. RMD video. That's very exciting. My neighbor from back in Rhode Island is texting me that he saw it. It's pretty cool. Other growth. I gotta go tend to my puppy.